Welcome everyone to the New Frontiers in Virtual Learning panel. Please feel free to post comments in the chat box and questions for our panelists in the Q&A. This session will run until 10:45. And then we'll ask you to transition over into our closing keynote with our very own CEO Ahmad Thomas and Laura Gio from IBM. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel introducer. And I did want to mention to you all before Zoe takes the stage that if you're planning on staying for the closing plenary, you are able to stay here in this network, in this channel. Thank you. Over to you, Zoe.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And hi, everyone. My name is Zoe Pilla, and I'm here from the IBM Corporate Social Responsibility team. So I'm just really thrilled to introduce the New Frontiers in Virtual Learning panel and share a little bit with you about IBM's education and skills initiatives. You're going to hear a lot more from Laura after this session in the closing remarks, but I'm just going to give an overview to all of you about what we're doing, especially in this kind of crazy and incredible moment where the coronavirus pandemic is really affecting everything that we do personally, professionally, and as a community. So, virtual learning has taken on a whole new meaning in the past 6 months. So at IBM, we've been committed to education and skills for our entire existence. So it's over 100 years at this point. And in that time, we've learned a lot, but I think, nothing has put our initiatives and our programs to the test like the last 6 months. So we've really ramped up all of our offerings for learners of all ages. So that's whether you're a K through 12 student, an adult learner, a teacher, or a job seeker. We really have resources and programs for you. And all of this work is deeply rooted in experiential, practical, and skills-based learning because we're really at the forefront of advancing skills versus degrees when it comes to workplace learning and job seeking. So it's been really interesting to kind of see how that evolves in a world where everything is remote. I like to think about it kind of like online learning has so many challenges. There's so many complicating factors. It's really hard to keep folks engaged. It often doesn't serve those who need it most. And really this crisis has kind of elevated some of those gaps. So at IBM, we've really tried to put some of our experience in virtual learning to the test and our research to try to address some of those problems. So just a couple examples for you. Our adult reskilling platform, Skills Build, is implemented through a partnership with nonprofits who can really provide those wraparound services that learners need in order to succeed. We've heard from a lot of folks. Today I was in the kind of shift in work panel previously and really thinking about, just upskilling or reskilling is only one aspect of going back to work. So really thinking about partnership in order to advance that. We have courses on AI for students, which are complemented with teacher professional development on the same topic, because we really feel, we can't expect our students to be prepared and to succeed if we're not empowering our educators. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that in this panel. And the last thing I'll just say is that, we know there's still work to do. And I think that's kind of why I'm so honored to be a part of this, this panel and this summit today. We as a company are bringing these advanced technologies into the marketplace. And so we understand we have a deep responsibility to ensure that learners have the skills required to participate in that new digital economy. It really takes deliberate and intentional actions in order to be more inclusive when it comes to the kind of new frontiers that we're going to talk about. So we're really excited to bring these new tools in collaboration with our partners to the Silicon Valley and beyond. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from the panel today. So thank you to all of you in advance, and thank you to SPLG for letting me introduce this. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Zoe. I'd now like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Karin Forsell, to introduce herself and our panelists.
Am I on? Good morning, everybody. Really a pleasure to be here with you this morning. And I'm super excited to be hearing from a really amazing group of people. I wanted to just take a moment to introduce them to you before we ask our first question and get the conversation started. And as with the previous session, we're hoping that you will contribute as well. We're saving some time at the end of the session for you to contribute your questions as we go. So I'm going to go in reverse alphabetical order just because. Denise Williams has served a 30-year career as a teacher and principal with expertise in instruction and categorical programs. She's now navigating distance learning as Chief Program Officer at the Silicon Valley Education Foundation. Welcome, Denise. Andrea Schwartz Boone is the founding director at Braven. Braven empowers promising underrepresented young people, including first-generation college students, students on Pell Grants, and/or students of color, on their path to college graduation and meaningful careers and lives of impact. Welcome, Andrea. Ron Gerhard is a leader in community college administration. He has expertise in financial management, enrollment management, and accreditation, and since in 2019, he has served as first interim, then the permanent chancellor of the Chabot-Las Positas Community College District. And welcome, Ron. And Dr. Ray Andrade, joining us from Arizona, where he has deep experience as a school administrator and as a lecturer at the University of Arizona. He is now principal of ACE Inspire Middle School in San Jose, where they are, as he says, building the ship as they sail it. So I'm very much looking forward to all of you sharing your expertise with us. And I'm going to go ahead and start, as I hope we will go on with some a question about some really practical and implementable insights that you've all had from this experience. So my first question, and I'm going to go down the line with you all, what has been a key learning or insight or lesson that you have experienced these last few months or from your previous experience for successfully implementing distance learning? And I'm going to go ahead and ask Denise to answer first, and then Andrea, and then Ron, and then Ray.
Okay, thank you, Karin. So there's been several things, but I think one of the major things that we've been talking about lately and getting feedback from the greater community is about parents being able to be engaged in this endeavor. It's very important that they have the support and feel the building of the community with them from their teacher, so that they feel that they're able to have a distant but close relationship as they are moving forward with this work. The parents are already nervous about this because they're going through a lot of different kinds of challenges, even to make it happen for their student at home. But then they're there now as the first teacher, so to speak. So how do they go through all of these challenges and ensure that their child is continuing to get a high level and quality education, and they have to be responsible about a lot of it. So they've also said that if it's a welcoming environment and it's developed so that they can have a clear path to talk to their teacher, that it's very, very important. Looked at some recent surveys, and they're really excited about the distance work, but it has to be able to support their needs also. How do I do this aspect of it? You know, how can I check in to see my child's grades? There are a lot of different little challenges that pop up with distance learning that we're trying to work through. But that all comes with, you know, the bigger picture of it, making sure that there is connectivity there for the child, and making sure that they are connected, and do they understand how to operate that computer? It's very important. They're really concerned about those areas, and we want to make sure that we can support them in those areas, and making sure that they're able to ask those questions. Like there should be, we just talked about back to school night, you know, which is always a face-to-face event, and teachers are really willing to have that kind of a structure in place, and parents are really excited to know that hopefully it could happen, because that's how they'll continue to build that community. And the community has to be built with the parents, or it kind of falls between the cracks. and we don't want to have that happen at the onset. So that's just like one little aspect of how we've moved forward and some of the feedback we've been getting.
That's excellent. So I'm hearing clear communication, which has different aspects. It's got an infrastructure aspect, but it also has a lot of norms involved of like how often are people communicating and making sure that they're reaching out. Nice. Great. Andrea, what do you have to add? What insights or lessons have you drawn from these last few months?
Yes, thank you for the question. Hi, everyone. We've learned, I mean, you all know this, little faces on a screen do not replace the healthy hum of a classroom. And college-age students face incredible stressors: unemployment, health concerns, family responsibilities, a loss of independence. And so we saw 4 elements really work in distance learning this past spring: safety, routine, repetition, and interaction. So on the safety front, of course, you want your online space to be secure, no Zoom bombing, please. But I mean more the socio-emotional safety. So we found great success in actually breaking classes up into small learning communities of about 7 students. Each class, those students met, they shared their roses and thorns, their things that were going well in their life, things that were hard. And students actually reported that this really felt like a family, a place they could feel vulnerable, get support, etc. On the routine front, it was really hard for students. They no longer had the forcing function of showing up to a building. So it was hard for them to manage their time. So keeping routines in place, like every class runs a similar way, every email is formatted in a similar way, etc., really helped establish some new norms for them. Repetition. There's a business guru, Patrick Lencioni. He says that adults need to hear something 7 times before it sticks. So even if you feel like a broken record, saying something over and over again really clearly and consistently can help students internalize the expectations and meet them. And then lastly, interaction. So we made it a best practice to ask students to engage at least once every 10 minutes, every class. So this could be answering a question in the chat, answering a poll, sharing something out loud, drawing on a Jamboard, getting in a breakout room. And so expecting the interaction will really help your students be engaged, be present, and actually learn.
Wow, that's quite a framework. I love frameworks. So we've got safety, routine, repetition, and interaction. Nice. Okay, great tips. Ron, I'm going to ask you next. What have you drawn from these last?
I appreciate that, and appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel and participate in this version of Hollywood Squares. So for us, we're a California community college. I would echo many of the same things that Denise and Andrea shared. But understanding our student demographics, so we're a multi-college district here in a relatively urban area of the Bay. And given our demographics, more than 80% of our students pursuing higher education are in some form or means of financial assistance. And so for us, even more simplistic, I would say infrastructure was number 1. Many of our students don't have access to computer other than perhaps their smartphone. And they don't have access at home or wherever they're couch surfing, or unfortunately, more and more of our students are homeless, have access to the internet. So I think the first thing that we learned and a key lesson was really having resources available to check out and loan computer laptops, hotspots, Wi-Fi's, so that our students could, as we transitioned in this pandemic to distance modality within 3 days, that our students had the infrastructure and the basics to be able to continue in this most difficult of time with their spring term. So, we, like many of our colleagues, loaned out thousands of laptops, hotspots, and really trying to do what we could from that vantage point, which is a little different than what panel members before me contributed, and really ensuring that we had students having the technological ability to engage and continue with their education.
And out of curiosity, did you repurpose those devices from somewhere else, or were they, this was a brand new purchase?
Well, that is a great question. Initially, because of as you would imagine, the overwhelming initial demand of Chromebooks and everything else, we got our orders in for initially hundreds of laptops to be able to loan out. But given the time that was going to take, we went to our community partners first, or really at the same time. And we're very fortunate to have such really committed community partners here in the East Bay, in the Bay Area in general, where we were able to get donations of surplus computers, desktops, and laptops from corporate partners and community-based organizations that were really initially what we used to get out to students, the most neediest of students at that time. So it was really a combination of leaning on community partners, corporate partners, and then purchases.
New systems for new times, and maybe this will be something we can carry on in the future. Dr. Andrade, Ray, I'd like to ask you the same question one more time. What insights or lessons have you learned from these last few months?
So thank you very much for the question. I appreciate everybody's response, and I hear a lot of sort of common responses and themes. One thing that I will say about Andrea's comment about 7 times, hearing something 7 times and learning it in K-12, including middle school and high school, I think it's more like dog years. And so that 7 is times 3. And I think maybe 21 times for an 8th grader might be more appropriate. But I really appreciate everybody's responses in terms of getting key levers, I call them key levers, in order to make sure we meet student needs. And for me, it's really important to get information from students as to what they need. I really am a big believer in honoring capacity and prior knowledge from students. And what we found was extremely useful is trying to create a space online where students felt that they were still safe and secure at their school. And so if I'm a student at our Inspire Academy or at our high school, how am I going to school at that place virtually? And so our goal was to create a place that was safe and secure in terms of honoring our culture programs that we have in place in face-to-face learning and in-person learning. And so we developed a system where it was easily navigation. The navigation was easy because it was directed towards something very familiar to the kids, including our mascot and our logo. We call it the Hot Corner. And so the kids had to report to the Hot Corner first, and that gave them the ability to go to their schedules and be with their teachers where they felt that they were still going to ACE Inspire Academy. So for me, one of the things that kept coming up as a theme is this idea of feeling safe, but also not lowering expectations. And we're talking about the equity and disparities in education. That kids and families in our network were very grateful that the kids were held to the same, we're trying to hold the kids to the same academic standards that we would in person. So the sense of normality and the safe and security were 2 big factors in developing our online learning for kids.
Thank you for that. And I'm actually going to push you to tell us a little bit. In our pre-conversation, you talked a little bit about one way of holding them to academic standards that you guys successfully implemented this spring, which was testing. Can you mention that briefly and share a little bit what you did?
Sure. So I received a phone call from a representative from the state testing department because, as we know, the state testing was waived for K-12 education. The accountability measure for state testing was waived. And so when I received the call, I was really excited because what they wanted is a pilot trial for an online version of the state testing. We call it our SBAC interim testing. And I got together with my admin team and I said, I think if we plan this and offer it, again, through our culture programs, through our navigation system, that we can pull this off. And so we planned it. We trained the teachers. We ran tests. The hardest part was keeping the student's identification number secure. So we found a way to do that through emailing students. So if you can imagine a group of 5th graders actually going through and cleaning up their email, setting up their calendar for these Zoom calls that we were testing virtually, we pulled it off. And we had over 70% of our kids submit an ELA final, we called it a final exam in ELA, and about the same, 68% or so of the kids submitted their math exam. And what was really interesting is that because this is kind of a self-selection exercise, we were very interested to see what the proficiency rates for the tests were. And we found a big improvement in test scores. We have to really dive into that data to see if there are other factors that contributed to that. But overall, the goal, I think, was to see if we could pull it off so that that kind of practice can inform our practice moving forward. So I think we got some great insight as to what we can offer our kids in terms of accountability. And then look at that accountability measure in terms of student outcomes, and then plan academic programs accordingly, just like we would do in person.
Right, and keeping those kids engaged in productive learning from wherever they are to wherever they're going. Nice. While we're on the subject of K-12, I'm going to go back to you, Denise, and ask you for what your insights were. What are some of the key elements in the successful implementation of distance learning from your experience with working with parents?
Other than parents, or?
No, with parents.
Okay, well, one of the things that I could have mentioned, and this aligns with parents also, but it is professional learning opportunities, because we have to do that with parents as well as our teachers. And just to touch on the teachers a bit, is that we were fortunate at the foundation this summer to have some amazing professional development for the teachers right before summer school. And I think that lends itself to why the program was so successful. I mean, we got a lot of great feedback from the teachers, from students, and from parents around how their students were so engaged in the work. And the thing that was mentioned earlier and in the first session was engagement. That's so important, because that's the piece that the governor also said he would like to see embedded in this work as we move forward, to make sure students are engaged. We want to see their little faces lean forward to the screen, because that is when we know that they are really tuned in and connected. And as we do that work, it's very important to have professional development for teachers to know what to do. I mean, when we first went out to pivot to COVID, to distance learning after COVID, it was kind of like crisis learning, because, we were not really ready at that time, but we were doing our best. And, we knew we would get better at it, but we were doing the best that we could at that time. But we looked and had some opportunities for some amazing PD this summer, so that teachers could say, oh, this is doable, and have some really great conversations. And then, of course, as I'm working with School to Home Project, we're also working with parents that were in distance learning before COVID, but they're now seeing the benefit of having very comprehensive professional learning, which really helped their transition into this COVID situation, and said, yes, still need more, but it's very helpful. So making sure that that's in place is definitely going to be on the priority list.
Absolutely, because you can't teach kids without teaching the teachers too. And this is, in some ways, a rather exciting time for being able to go back to basics around good teaching.
And being very creative around it. It's been really great.
Fantastic. Andrea, you've been focusing on one particular aspect of professional development. How do you teach your group to build community?
Yeah, so studies show, you all know this, that a sense of belonging is associated with increased persistence and graduation rates for college students. So it's really important that the group connects on a positive emotional level. And it's hard to do that on top of all the logistics that we have to figure out as educators with online learning. Whenever I think about a sense of belonging, I think about the Maya Angelou quote, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they won't forget how you made them feel. And so we tried to really make sure the environment felt safe, engaging, and one of community. Some things we did, we really tried to ensure that the educators had the right mindset, were doing what they could to operate with compassion and generosity, as they inevitably encountered challenges and as they sought to support students. We had the educators really focus on building trust. So They made little videos to introduce themselves to the students, sharing their personal story, their professional path. They modeled vulnerability by sharing just what's hard about teaching virtually, what's worked, what they're hoping they can practice and learn together. We tried to think about ways to actually build connections. So one example, we asked students to submit a song of significance that's meaningful to them. That's classroom appropriate, of course. And then the educators actually played those songs during transition moments in the class. And it just helped the students feel seen and connected and learn from one another. We announced like, oh, this is so-and-so song of significance. And then we really tried to encourage reflection at every point to make sure students felt seen and heard. So this was as simple as literally like ending class and asking for some sort of share, like, please type something in the chat that you learned today. And so I guess our headline was, if students feel trusted and respected and heard, they're more likely to be able to actually engage and learn.
And that so honors why they're there to begin with, to include that in that conversation. Ron, I'm going to come to you for perspectives on how the community colleges contribute in this ecosystem in this current pandemic.
Well, yes, I'd say, you know, in general, the way our system and our structure works is that, you know, unfortunately, we our resources and our funding are at their lowest when our demand is the greatest. And it's just the economic cycles and state budget as well. So in general, I would say that really during this pandemic-induced recession, our role in the economy is what it was in the last, you know, last economic cycles that we've experienced here for the last 20, 30 years. In that where we serve as a regional and local economic engine to get unemployed and really any students who have the ability to benefit from education and retraining, retooling back in the labor market as quickly as we can. And that's really, as we see it, really no different now as it was during the dot-com bust and, again, the other economic recessions that we've experienced. It just now, the complexities are a little bit more, given that it's in a distance education modality, where in the past, you know, for example, you know, before COVID, 90% of our classes were face-to-face. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, in March 16th, we converted those 90% to now all online and distance ed modality. So it's the dynamics in terms of our role in serving as that educational opportunity for some of our most disadvantaged students and those that are unemployed and recently unemployed and trying to get back in the labor market. We serve as that resource. It's the challenge for us, as I see it, is doing it in a different way than historically we've been required to do it or asked to do it.
Which in some ways could be pretty exciting to do it in a new way. Maybe this is a new frontier. And actually, this is going to be my last question. I'm going to ask everybody to jump in after Ron. But what are you going to take away from this current situation that you might actually keep, even if we go back to what we used to call normal?
Yeah, you know, we had our convocation yesterday, and that was kind of a theme in that, you know, this is exciting. Yes, we all wish it would have come under different circumstances, but I think it is an opportunity for us to really reevaluate the traditions and the norms that we've held so dearly for decades in terms of, you know, traditional community college education. What does that look like for both for us as institutions, for faculty, and for students? And I think we have an opportunity to be critical of that and better that to reflect the times and to reflect really what the demands on our students and demands of employers who employ them are looking for moving forward. So, you know, hearing the professional development conversation earlier is that, you know, we've really one exciting thing that we've done is really created professional development curriculum for our faculty that they went through over the summer, which really was in preparation for next Monday's beginning of instruction. And our faculty really have embraced that. And, you know, I think, as I told them yesterday, is that I think it's exciting, and, you know, their excitement, I think, is critical in terms of keeping that momentum and that ball rolling. And we're going to continue that through the fall in this academic year.
Because as some people don't realize, community college and college and university faculty very rarely actually get trained as teachers, right? So here we have an opportunity.
Exactly, and you know, that's one thing that we as a system, I would say, in California community colleges, we struggled with, is in terms of, you know, providing that professional development opportunities. We struggle to find resources to support that, and under the circumstances, really we came together with our faculty union, and really as a district came together to put together the resources that we could to support this work over the summer. So it's, you know,
pretty exciting.
It is exciting, and I think you know, going back to one of the core of your question, is that I think this is something that is movement, ground shaking, that I think will continue with us, has to continue with us as we move forward.
Yeah, very nice. Denise and Ray and Andrea, any of you want to jump in and sort of share one thing that you're going to take forward that you hope becomes the new normal?
I'll say something. I'm going to throw my copy machine away. I'm very excited about it.
Less paper.
Yeah, what I'm hoping, and just to this point about professional development, and thank you, Denise, for bringing that up. This has given us a wonderful opportunity to really prepare for you know, the things that we wanted to do in the pivot but didn't have time for. This idea of a summer break where we had time to prepare both parents and teachers and kids for the new kind of like new online world. Has really been super beneficial for us. Purchasing a learning management system that has enabled us to really guide the kids and families towards a central location has been just so beneficial. We had on the second day of school a 92% attendance rate at our middle school, which was astounding. And so those lessons, I think, that we're going to stay online, so to speak, even when we come back, are going to be, you know, driving education just light years ahead of where we were.
Exciting too. Denise and Andrea, before we go to audience questions, anything else that you'd like to keep? Oops, Denise.
Okay, good. So Karin, you know, in my head, it's like the words of Maya Angelou. So you do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, you do better. And for me, that's like my mantra moving forward, because I'm so proud of the work that we have been able to do in the foundation and even at the county level, and moving teachers and parents forward in this work. And I would like to take it to the next level. I should say we, because this is a team effort. And I really appreciate all of the work that we have done in all aspects of trying to pivot to do this work right. But we just want to bring it back better, because we know we can, and it just takes time. Everyone's learning together, but the creativity that I've seen from teachers and from parents just in this movement has been simply amazing. And to keep that level and to be able to transmit it onto the students as they are becoming the drivers in this work, because they can participate and do their work, but on that continuum of learning, distance learning, we want the students to be the drivers. So as we continue to do the work, we're going to put a platform and continue to move students along this continuum so that they are in driving, and that's going to keep them engaged. And we won't have to go look and see where Mary Beth was yesterday. She's going to be right there on her computer, because she's excited to see what she's going to learn and how she can bring product and bring some her input into that learning. So really excited about that.
Giving the students voice, absolutely. Andrea, last word to you, and then we'll go to some audience questions.
Yeah, I'll just say I hope that our sector just continues to move as nimbly and with innovation and as collaboratively as we've had to the last 6 months moving forward. Braven, we really think about how to empower underrepresented students from humble beginnings towards economic mobility and strong jobs. And so we had to, back in March, actually research the impacts of historical, social, and economic crises like the Great Depression and the Great Recession to update our curriculum to actually support students, not just to find a job, but to find a great job during an economic downturn. So I think it's that level of innovation and making sure you're being responsive to student needs and then collaborating with others to implement those that I'm hoping we all continue to operate with in the future.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to go to an audience question. I think we've actually addressed a couple of them in passing since they were asked, but let me go ahead and go back to this one. How do we encourage best practices of onboarding support for educators, administrators, leaders, and parents in learning communities across contexts towards better partnership programs and serving overall underserved, diverse communities of students? This is an onboarding question. There's really a lot of work to be done on the administrative side to bring people along with these. Any ideas about how we can do that better?
Well, I would say one thing in terms of onboarding would be also ensuring that we have our administrators, you know, in alignment with the conversations also, because I work with Eastside Alliance really closely, and I think they're really appreciative of the time that we take to work with them and make sure that they're shoulder to shoulder with their teacher and their parents in doing the work. It is, and we want that. We want that mobility, and we want that conversation to be had. So it's very important that we are connecting and putting structures in place so that they have a voice also in this work, and so that they can not only speak about it amongst their colleagues, but be very comfortable and confident when they go back to their community, talking to their teachers, talking to their parents. And it does take time to do that, but we want to ensure that they have an opportunity to be in those conversations also. It's very important. And plus we have a lot of new administrators also, and they need to be a part of the work and getting on board, and they are worrying about being new and also moving forward with a whole different model. So just being there to support them.
So it sounds like it's a bit of a question of priorities, of making the time for these kinds of conversations, because we always have time for what's most important. Well, that's a provocative statement there, but who doesn't have time to show up in class, right?
Exactly.
So what do you see as the core of your job, and what is the thing that you actually make your time for? Interesting questions. All right, who else would like to jump in on this question of onboarding? Infrastructure or norms or expectations?
The way I would answer that question is through our interview process. And so in our organization, our interview process for new prospective teachers, our recruiting process for prospective teachers includes a demo lesson. It always has. And the demo lesson that a teacher has to conduct always has kids in front of them when we're in-person learning. So we decided to move that system in an online format. And so all of our recruiting for new staff, including resident teachers, was to conduct a Zoom lesson, and we invited kids, our students, in on these Zoom lessons. And I always get feedback from kids, I should say the team gets feedback from kids as to whether or not this is a person that can work in our school. And that process of planning, providing support for those teachers, and then showing the prospective candidates that this is a place where they're supported by a team. And thank you, Ms. Williams, for saying that, because this really is a kind of planning of a vision process with an amazing team that puts together these systems. And so that support is shown in the interview and recruitment process, and then the support, especially for new staff. It's hard enough to support new staff in the teaching world, in the education world, K to 12, in person. But how do we support a new staff member who is moving from outside of the city into San Jose, living in an apartment, conducting class online with 30 kids in front of them? So what we've decided to do is conduct our schedule so that every teacher has a support teacher who is in a team teaching situation with the kids. So every classroom has 2 adults, and parents are invited as well into the process. So for us, the onboarding aspect of it has been also something that has required a tremendous amount of learning from the admin team.
And some really creative thinking about structures and master schedules and things too, I'm sure. Let me ask one last question. We've got 2 minutes left, but I think this one's a really interesting one. Any suggestions for ways to support the mental or social emotional health of students, high school students or otherwise, during distance learning? So small groups, support teams may be possible, but it might be also impracticable. Any other ideas about how we can support our students' well-being during this time?
Ron. Okay, I'll go first on that one. So I would say what we've been doing at both of our colleges is we've brought on board mental health counselors, and that's something that's pre-pandemic that we've seen a spike in student need and support. I would say also, in addition to that, we have developed partnerships with community organizations, community nonprofit organizations that really help support students who are struggling in that way. And so really through those partnerships, we've been able to double the number of hours that our mental health counselors have on campus. I'd say in addition to that, we have a number of, like many colleges do, we have a number of student programs and services that offer embedded within them those types of services, mental health counseling, tutoring, support networks like that. So we've done it really through those two means.
Excellent. Andrea, I'm going to give you the last word, and then we're going to have to stop because our time is up.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I do think with college students, they might be more willing to like self-manage a breakout space and smaller group community. For high school students, if there is a way, like I have found personally, and this is a plug to all of the wonderful corporate members of SVLG, Braven engages hundreds of corporate volunteers every year. And there is a hunger right now as people are more and more at home to actually volunteer and give back. So I could see a world where you have a volunteer per small team who's actually there consistently. It can't be a new person every time, but there with the group, modeling the vulnerability, creating that trust, and then reporting up if and when, keeping all privacy concerns in mind, when there might be a challenge that needs addressing in a more formal or serious way by a counselor. So I'm just, yeah.
Yeah. That's great. More people in education. Let's rally the troops. We are out of time. Thank you so much to all our wonderful presenters and panelists. I'm going to go ahead and hand this over now to our SVLG team. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you all. We'd like to thank today's moderator, Dr. Karin Forsell, and this amazing panel. At this point, I'd like to welcome you to our closing keynote featuring our new CEO, Ahmad Thomas, and Laura Gio from IBM. Thank you all. We will give folks about 1 minute to join into this session.